You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
Talked on this show about all the places that I've worked. I've talked about Blockbuster Video. I talked about Multi-Video. You're vaguely aware. Well, I talked about Spencer Gifts. You're vaguely aware that I work at Knott's Berry Farm. I don't talk about it a lot simply because I still work there, and you can't dish about the place you work if you still want to work there. So what I've never talked about or mentioned briefly is the first job I ever had. Now, I did deliver flyers for a pizza joint, and that would be Circus Pizza right by my house. The guy there paid $5 if you delivered flyers, but he had to go check. So you would he'd give you like a little range of where to go. You'd ride your bike down, you'd put flyers on every single door for his pizza, and then you'd ride back to get your $5, and he would go, "We're gonna go check." So he'd go check, and he'd make sure you put those flyers on the doors. But then he'd hand you $5. And then what would you do with the $5? Yes, you would walk to the back of Circus Pizza, change it into quarters, and give it right back to him. What a racket this guy had. That's the ultimate way to stay in business, to pay your employees and then have them spend it right at the company store, so to speak. It's kind of like the second or third season of Malcolm in the Middle, where they moved Francis, the older brother, to Alaska, and he could never save enough money to get out because everything he needed was from the company store, the very place that you worked. So you weren't making any money. But no, we delivered flyers. Me and Toby Taylor delivered flyers for Circus Pizza. But that was like once or twice. The actual real first job I ever had, this one happened, I was obviously in drama in high school, did every play from 8th grade on, and the drama teacher, Maggie Regalado, she was still trying to be a working actor. You know, she wasn't just your drama teacher. She was also still doing shows, and she got cast in a show in a little tiny theater up in Santa Monica, and the show was The Fatal French Dentist. I can't believe this stupid show is such a weird, like, satellite part of my life. Like, I started out working at the show, and I'll get to that in a second, but then we did the show in high school, and we took it to a competition. So this stupid show of manners, like, it just wouldn't go away, and it's not a very good show to begin with. It's about two couples or three couples who are having these dinner parties, and there's a game like who's going to bring the best guest, and one of them's going to bring a French dentist. And even though you never see the dentist, he's like the catalyst for these people arguing with each other, and it wasn't that good to begin with. It really wasn't. So, but when you get asked to work on a show, you make the best out of the material, whether you're on stage or backstage. And in the case of this one, my friend Terry Hathaway and I were recruited by the drama teacher to work backstage at this little theater. Now, I thought it was great. I was all gung-ho for this because at this time I was 16. I didn't have a car. Gosh, I might have been 15 when I think about it. I didn't have a car, and no, I was 16. I got to be 16 for that. I mean, 15 is just way too young. But Terry and I would finish high school, and we'd get in the car, and we'd drive up to Santa Monica, and we would run backstage for this dinky little production of The Fatal French Dentist. And you know what? if you see the show, there's not that much to work backstage at all anyways. There's no major set changes. It's mostly just table and chairs. And at one point, they have a little dessert that they eat on stage. So we get there, and the guy takes us to the backstage area. We go through the house, onto the stage, to the backstage area, and then we were outside. And I said, dude, we're in an alley. He goes, yeah, the backstage is the alley. I said, what kind of theater is this? Our high school has a backstage. Well, this is all we have. Okay. So then he shows us the dessert, and we're going to cut it up and serve it on plates so that it's ready to go during the show. Now, it was this awful spice cake, and I'll never forget this guy cutting it up and like just drooling over the spice cake, and then asking us, like, if there's any left over, you guys are welcome to it. Like, this is not what I want. Spice cake? No, I'm good, thank you. And, in that age, you'll eat anything, but we weren't going to eat this nasty spice cake, The lips acquire stains, the spice is everything. Arrakis, desert planet. So Terry and I did this show, and it had a pretty long run. I bet it was like a month or 6 weeks that this dumb show ran. And a couple of weeks in, Terry and I are getting ready. We're backstage work is you make sure all the props are ready on the prop table. You make sure the set pieces, the furniture is ready to go, and you have a checklist that you go through of everything that needs to be done before the show starts, and then you need to know exactly when the scene changes are going to occur, when the actors are going to walk off stage, and you hand them the prop. And we got pretty good at it. It becomes backstage on a show becomes a really well-oiled machine, and every piece fits into each other, and people are moving back and forth, and it becomes very routine. So we got good at it. There was no cell phones to distract us, nothing to do except concentrate on the show and what we were doing. Now, we weren't getting paid. We weren't getting any money for this show. Terry and I were working for free. What we were getting grades. The teacher would give you good grades for any kind of extracurricular theater activity you did. So even though, like, I was in drama class, I was an overachiever because I was doing shows that I wrote, not at this point, but very close to it. Shows I had written, and by senior year, this massive 3-act play, and like I was president of the Thespian Society, so I was no slouch in the drama department. So it wasn't like I was hanging on by a thread and I needed to drive up to Santa Monica to save my grade. But it was fun, and immersing yourself in theater, even rinky-dink, alley backstage theater is still theater. And those of us that have the theater bug know that there's nothing like being backstage before a show starts, and then during it, and then patting yourself on the back when it ends. And it's like creating a little mini family on the stage. The play's the thing, as Winona says in Little Women, right? So what happened was, a couple of weeks in, this guy shows up, and he's looking for people to work backstage at a legitimate, i.e. paying, theater. So Terry and I are like, oh, well, we're your guys. We're all for it. So I was really nervous. I went to my teacher, Maggie, and I was like, Maggie, this guy's from the Grand Dinner Theater in Anaheim, and he wants to pay Terry and me to come do backstage work on one of his shows. Now, I braced for the worst. I thought, I've let her down. She's going to unload on me. This is bad. I'm going to get an F. I'm doing everything in drama, including painting the sets and writing the scripts, and I'm still going to get an F because I've let the teacher down in an extracurricular, way. And instead, my teacher, Maggie, looked at me with some really good advice, and she said, you make $0 here, Jeff. If they're willing to pay you or pay you more, you always go. And nobody here is going to think ill of you, because that's the way of the theater. You're replaceable here. And that's good and bad. But it was mostly good because Terry and I immediately the next day went up to the Grand Dinner Theater in Anaheim, the heart of Orange County. The Grand Hotel was located right across the street from Disneyland. So this was actually a lot closer. Instead of 45 minutes, it probably took 20 to get there. So Terry and I get there, and this is legitimate, like, big production where everybody's getting a paycheck. They expect total professionalism, and I was like, oh, sign me up. This is the big time. You know, I was used to doing theater at high school. Now, the play had already opened, so this is April 1988. I am 16 years old, and I am entering the legitimate theater world for the first time. And you know what? I was so happy. Now, the first thing they had us do, Terry and I would drive down after school. There was a 7:30 show Tuesday through Friday. The show was dark Mondays. So Tuesday through Friday, as soon as school ended, we drove down to Anaheim. And I was there till 10 or 11 o'clock. And then I'd come back, sleep, go to school, start it all over again. Saturday and Sunday, there was a noon lunch show, afternoon, and then later in the evening, evening show. So 2 shows Saturday and Sunday, 1 day off. Terry and I were working 6 days a week and going to high school, and the pay was $100. $100, and they took taxes out. So I used to get my check and cash it. I didn't even have a bank account. I would go to Albertsons for their check cashing, and I would get $93 for my week of work. And you know what? It felt really good. It felt really good to do theater in that manner, and then at the end of the week, get a paycheck. You know, to head over to the head office and get a paycheck. And it was very gratifying because I sort of discovered early on that it wasn't out of the arena of the possibility to get paid to do what you like, that there were jobs out there. You didn't have to work with a headset at the drive-thru, you know, or at the hardware store. You could actually get a job doing what you liked. So I thought it was great. Now, the first job they had me do was they put me in the light booth, the tech booth, and I ran the follow spot. Now, I had never run a follow spot before. In high school, I was always in the show. I was not backstage. So I was doing like both sides here. In high school, I was prepping to be on stage. And at the Grand, I was the backstage crew. So this girl there, I don't even remember her name. It was a girl and a guy who were basically the main tech guys. There was a very small backstage crew and a very small tech booth crew. They took me under their wing, and they taught me how to run a follow spot. Now, I had to buy gloves because this thing was so archaic and got so hot. You could burn yourself very easily if you touched the wrong piece. So very quickly, I got some gloves, and I learned how to rotate the iris and do these really soft dissolves between the main light and the follow spotlight. And it was great, too, because the girl would run... She ran the light board, and the guy ran the music. I kept looking for the musicians, and it wasn't until like a few weeks later they were like, there are no musicians, Jeff. It's all a machine. Like, that was really surprising to me because it sounded like there was a band somewhere in the building, but there wasn't. So while I'm running the follow spot, the girl running the lighting board, she would give me pointers. We're going to go in 3, 2, go. I'd get the light up. She'd go, okay, we're going to crossfade in 3, 2, you bring yours down, 1, go. And if I did it right, she'd go, very nice. You know, do a little better next time. She was very supportive. And it was a really nice learning experience. And it was weird because Terry was put backstage. I don't know what Terry was up to. Now, Terry was a bigger guy. So I imagine Terry was in charge of they had a single major set that they would bring on. It was the apartment, and then they would bring it off and to make other settings. So my whole take on the first couple of weeks was I watched the show and I got, a feel for the flow of the show and the lighting and that sort of thing. And the show was Cage aux Folles. Cage aux Folles, which today seems quaint. It is the story of two guys, a homosexual couple, who run a club for drag queens. And the gimmick is that people go to see the show and there's 99% guys dressed as women and then a couple of women. So you're always guessing as to who's the man and who's the woman. And at the end of the numbers, they pull their wigs off and reveal who's who. And the story is that these two guys, Georges and Alban, it's adapted from a French farce. Georges fathered a son before he decided, my true self is that I'm gay, and he got with Alban. So they've raised this boy from a youngster, and he's straight, and it's very progressive for a play that originated in the 70s. And in 1988, Across from Disneyland was probably shocking. Nowadays, nobody even bats an eyelash. A well-mascaraed eyelash, thank you. But so what happens is that the son comes home, he's met a girl, he wants their blessing to get married. Of course, they're happy for him. But it turns out the girl's father is a pretty big politician who has lobbied for anti-gay, anti-homosexual laws. So they don't know what they're going to do. And what happens is the couple, if you've seen the Birdcage, it's the same story. Birdcage is adapted from La Cage. I forgot there was an American counterpart with Robin Williams and Nathan Lane and Hank Azaria. But the couple decides that in order to make their son happy, they're going to pretend to be straight. So their apartment is transformed from all naked men of Roman persuasion to big crucifixes and dark colors instead of bright. And Albert is given lessons on how to be more masculine. And all goes well until Albert just can't take it anymore because George is being so against who he really is. So Albert takes off, and George realizes that he's got to be himself or he's going to lose the one person that he loves more than anything. And in the end, all is well. The couples are reunited, and the politician is trying to get out of the homosexual club, so they dress him in drag, and then they alert the media, so they get pictures of him in drag. It's a very cute show, but try being a 16-year-old guy in the throes of the vice grip of puberty and not being able to get a date and not knowing how to talk to women. And suddenly I was immersed in this, not only a theater culture, which is already like bohemian and free love and don't worry about it, relax, but add on the layer of they hired some of the best drag queens around. Like, these guys really looked like women. So I was just, oh my God, what am I going to do? But you know what? It didn't really affect me. I've never been biased in any way. I'm very tolerant of everybody. Whoever you want to be is okay with me. And I think working at the Grand so early just sort of cemented that in me. Like, I saw every type of persuasion at this show, and it just seemed like business as usual. Hey, you're gay? That's great. Look, we got a show to do, And isn't that the attitude to have? So what happened was I would have been trapped in the tech booth for the run, except Terry decided he didn't want to do it anymore. He didn't want to work at the show anymore. So I lost my ride, and I called in a couple of times and said, "Look, I don't have a ride down. I don't know what to do." Like, we'll figure it out, Jeff. We'll figure it out. I still want to work there. And they're like, "Well, we still want you to work here." So, of course, my mother stepped in because I didn't have a driver's license yet. And even if I did, it would have been a learner's permit, and I wouldn't have been able to go on the freeway by myself. So my mother stepped in, and God bless her, she drove me and picked me up from the Grand Dinner Theater 6 nights a week. Now, Saturday and Sunday, I was there all day. I got dropped off at 10 a.m., and I didn't get picked up till 11 p.m. But it didn't matter to me because it was a lot of fun. But the fallout from Terry calling in and quitting, basically, was that they learned to do the follow spot without me. And the lesson that I learned that I've kept up till this day, and if you're listening, kids, this is what you need to know. You never need to let your employer know that you're replaceable. Even if they say it, you need to make sure that you are irreplaceable and that they can't do it without you. Whatever walk of life you're in. So I was kicked out of the light booth and I was put backstage. I didn't mind because I was still in the show. And I became the employee of a woman named Laura Stamatakis. And she's a really nice younger lady, probably late 20s, early 30s. And she was the head wardrobe person at the theater. So in addition to helping move the set with another guy named, his name was Cope. His last name was Cope. I don't remember his first name. But he would always go, your last name is Cope? And he'd go, can you? And I'd go, I think I can. I can cope? Oh, it's a joke. Oh, hey, sorry. But you learn to live with these people because you spent so much time with them backstage. You were trapped back there, but trapped in a good way. But with Laura, in addition to moving props and the sets, and it was funny too because some of the entrances and exits were really fast. So you would run backstage through the dark passages there. You'd grab like whatever it was, like a vase of flowers, and you'd stand off stage with it out in your hand, and then a second later the actor would take it without even looking and go back on stage. So again, it was like being a cog in a machine. But with Laura, because she was head of wardrobe, I became a dresser. And let me tell you, folks, for a 16-year-old guy, this was insane. Like my job, they taught me how to pool a dress. Have you ever heard that term, to pool a dress? That is Pool, a dress. That means you get the dress, you take it off the hanger, you lay it on the ground, and you open it up so that the actor can run off stage, fling their clothes off, jump into the middle, and you pull it up. At the same time, they stick their arms in, and then you zip as fast as you can because they're going right back on stage. And I did this for Albert and a couple of the drag queens. And then one day, like, they had hired a really pretty girl to play the fiancée. And one day, I got assigned to dress her. Now, she was very good looking, and I was a raging heterosexual boy. And so I would pull her dress. She would run off stage, fling all of her clothes off down to bra and panties, and step in. I would pull up, I would zip, and I would just think about Cylons and Wookiees the whole time so that I didn't embarrass myself. But what a trip that was. And you know what? Every day backstage at Cage Aux Folles was an adventure. The cast and crew were so nice. The cast included, the lead was Bill Hayes. He was a very distinguished older actor. I looked him up recently on Wikipedia, and you know what? He's still alive. He's 89, and he's still alive. God bless him. He had a big hit in the 50s with Ballad of Davy Crockett. It's not the one heard in Back to the Future, but it was the one that charted higher on the charts. But he was also on Days of Our Lives. And this was a big deal because my mother, even though she watched All My Children, she was aware of who he was. So I was like, yeah, I work with this guy, Bill Hayes. She was like, oh my gosh, he's so handsome. I was like, yeah, I guess. And then we had George McDaniel as Alban. I don't think George ever did anything that's like really noteworthy. Their manservant in the movie, it's played by Hank Azaria. We had an African-American guy named Mark, and God, Mark was the funniest guy I'd ever worked with. He had all this slang he would talk about. If somebody was bothering him, he would just look at him and go, "Ga ga," and walk away. And that became like the backstage term. If somebody was in your face, you'd go, "Ga ga," and just walk away. And it just, there's nothing better than a workplace vernacular. Like, workplace slang means you're all part of the same group. You know, you're all members. Everybody knows the secret handshake. And for a young guy like me, it was really cool to be accepted and welcomed into basically the adult world of theater. And nothing more adult than Cage aux Folles, because it featured lingerie and just this side of male and female nudity, and it was crazy. The star dressing rooms were downstairs. George and Alban, Bill Hayes and George McDaniel. And then upstairs was this catacomb of crazy dressing rooms. And there was a sign they had hung on the stairs that said, "Home for Wayward Girls." And that represented all the drag dancers of Cage and the one or two female dancers mixed in, right? So if you went up there, it looked like it looked like Showgirls. It looked like a scene out of a movie, with everybody had their own distinct little stall with all their makeup and their feather boas and all their costumes. And like, for a guy like me who dreamed of being in the theater, I just would go up there and like, I've made it. At 16, I've made it. It was so much fun. It didn't feel like it was ever going to end. It felt like summer camp with a paycheck. You know, like, I never got to go to theater camp like a lot of kids get to go to and learn how to, Broadway summer camp. I don't know if I could handle it now. I don't know if I could have handled it back then. But this was my own personal version of it. The other thing that was great was having the full run of the Grand Hotel. You know, I knew every back alley, every door that said employees only. Well, that's me. I'm an employee. I went to the restaurant up front and would order full meals for like $2. I would play Spy Hunter in the arcade, sit-down version, and I would explore the theater. It was just like, it's one of those things in your life where you look back and it just is a sepia-toned, black and white, candy-coated memory of just no responsibility. I was doing fine in school, and I had this thing that I could go to that was my own after school. Where are you going after school? Oh, we're going to hang out. Me? I'm going to work at the dinner theater. Cage aux Folles, baby. I was there for the actual grand opening of the show. They had a big star-studded affair with, shrimp and caviar. And it was really cool. And I'll never forget, like, there were celebrities there. I don't remember any of them except one. And it was one that mattered. I looked up, and it was Cesar Romero, the Joker from the Batman show. I was like, oh my God. I mean, I recognized him in an instant. It's Cesar Romero. So I had to, I think you're the greatest. Well, thank you, young man. You're the Joker. Why, I think you. I mean, this is before the Keaton Batman. So at that point, he is the only known Joker actor ever. What a legacy, man. He had that all the way from 66 to 89 summer. And still does. I mean, they still make slot machines and action figures of Cesar Romero where they covered up his mustache with white grease paint. It was a lot of fun working there. We also had parties all the time. I know that Bill Hayes threw a big Easter party at his. I don't think it was his house. I think he was renting an apartment right by the show, so he wouldn't have to travel far. And I remember just being in this really posh apartment celebrating Easter, like really weird. Easter night, I'm there. I don't mind it at all. It was fun. I I mean, I've said that a lot, but it was such a good time to be doing what you love, to be minimally paid for it, and to exist in like a big hotel with all the nooks and crannies and places that you could go. And we would have all these things going on backstage, running jokes. At one time, the set fell apart during a show and nearly hit one of the actors. So somebody put a sign backstage that said, "For sale, set barely used, promises not to hurt the actors." And boy, the director was like, "This is not what we do here." Like, well, it kind of is. I mean, the set did fall. You get that off of there. And you know what else I learned? And this is a really interesting thing. I had already done a few plays up to this point. I'd even played the lead in Charlie's Aunt. I was always used to doing theater, and you only existed when the audience could see you, and you knew when the audience could see you. But what I learned at the Grand, and what I learned it from Mark, who played their butler, was there was a scene where they've got him all dressed up to be the straight butler, and he's going to get the politician's luggage and bring it on. And Mark's just off stage, and he's throwing the luggage onto the set. But he's doing it in full character. Agador, is that his name? Agador? And he's just full, like, facial expressions, hand gestures. And I was like 3 or 4 feet away in the darkness watching and going, this guy's in character even if only one person in the audience is watching him. And that's, like, it just clicked in my head. That's acting. That's being in character. That's living in the moment. That's immersing yourself in the show. And that's a great lesson to learn, because every actor thinks they know it all the minute they do a play, and you really don't. And you're always learning and honing your craft and becoming better at what you do. And I'll never forget, that was how many years ago? 27 years ago. And I can remember it like it's happening now, of Mark just throwing that luggage and going and making a little and throwing it like it was hysterical, and it was totally in character, and it might have been just for me, but it helped Mark because it made Mark stay in character. And it was amazing. And there was also some really great moments in the show, like the dancers, the ensemble, they were amazing. The showstopper of I Am What I Am, where George McDaniel is basically center stage at a fake makeup counter with no mirror, and he's looking at the audience, and he's singing I Am What I Am and putting his makeup on, and he had to learn how to do it without the mirror, because you don't get the mirror there. You're looking at the audience. And I can remember watching it and just being blown away at the bravery and the craftsmanship on display of a guy commanding an audience like that, of being center stage in blackness with just minimal spotlight on you, and he just owned it. And I made a point to get backstage once I was removed from the lighting booth, getting backstage where I could watch that every time, and watching it from different angles, which helped a lot too. But there were many fine moments in that show, and it had a good run, had a healthy run, which is pretty amazing considering that they were, across the street from the happiest place on earth, which actually worked out at one point, because I can remember one Saturday during Blast to the Past, where Disney was celebrating the 50s, I got a sign-in. So I did the first show, walked over to Disneyland, and went there for like 3 or 4 hours, and then went back and did the second show. And I just felt like on top of the world. I'm doing a show. I'm at Disneyland. I got a Blast of the Past hula hoop to take home and hang on my wall. And it was just really cool. I got to see my friend Felipe because he was in the parade. And there came this tradition of the cast would find things to do in between those matinees and primetime shows. So it's the first time I discovered Santa Ana Main Place Mall, because I mean that's so far out of my jurisdiction. But I remember the first time going there and being blown away at how decorated the mall was, because Cerritos and Lakewood were nice places to go, but they weren't like pop culture icon looking, giant things on the walls and stuff. They even had a place at the food court called the Surfside Grill, where they had a Volkswagen bus that had been converted into an aquarium. Like, so many, like, wow, this is Orange County, man, it's so different and cool. And we would go there for the movies in between the shows. And it just became, again, all theater becomes a family, really. And it was a lot of fun and a lot of really good memories. But, all shows have a run, and eventually La Cage aux Folles was slated to close. I mean, you've got your ticket holders around the area. You're hoping to get some tourists, but once everybody local has seen it, you gotta move on. And the next show they were gonna do, they did Chorus Line. They were rotating in like perennial favorites and then risky ones, like La Cage aux Folles. But one of them came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to stay on for Chorus Line?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, of course. Summer's coming. I'll be free all day. That sounds great." And then, like a couple days later, the director brings me into his office, and he's like, "Hey, Jeff, I'm really sorry, but we're not going to be able to keep you on. There's no budget for another Backstage guy." And I remember like being really honest with him, and I laughed. I said, "Are you serious? I make $100 a week, $93 take home." It's like, that's just out of our budget. I was like, okay, hey, no hard feelings. I had a great run. I will treasure this. I mean, this was my first job. You couldn't ask for a better first job than live theater and everything that comes with it. And then finding out, like, the guy who played the politician was Don Forney. And Don Forney, I would end up working with at Knott's Berry Farm. He was a very esteemed local actor, really nice guy. He was basically head of the birdcage for years at Knott's Berry Farm. So there were all these emotions. Like, it was sad to go, but I was okay with it. I'd had my experience. I knew I wasn't going to make a career out of it. I'm not that good a singer, so I wasn't going to be a musical theater guy. And as much as I loved the Backstage arena, like, I knew it wasn't for me. Like, I knew I wanted to be on the creative end somewhere, either acting, or what I ended up doing is, directing, writing, creating, molding out of thin air shows and productions. And that's where my real passion lies. But the Grand Dinner Theater really gave me that launching pad to realize, like, I could do it. Anybody can do it. There's no special formula. You just have to find your outlet and get busy, And if I hadn't done, Backstage in the alley at the Fatal French Dentist, then I wouldn't have ended up at the Grand Dinner Theater. So that was 1988. I left there, took a few weeks off, and then my mom somehow wrangled a job for me at a place called the United Cambodian Community Center. And I remember thinking, like, what? Well, come on, Jeffrey, we're going to the Cambodian Center. I go, what am I going to do at the Cambodian Center? So I went there, and it was a Cambodian guy. And it turns out he would find jobs for students. And it was mostly for, yes, Cambodian students. But my mom knew him for some reason, and he was like, yeah, I'll get your kid a job, no problem. So that summer, 1988, I worked the whole summer at the unemployment office. The unemployment office. I was in charge of their stockroom. So, like, that was really weird. I would drive up, I'd put my little number in the keypad, and I was paid through the United Cambodian Community Center, but I worked at the employment office. People would ask me, well, where do you work? Where do you work in the summer? Employment office. Yeah, where do you work? At the actual employment office. They're like, really? Like a government office? You're 16. I go, my mom got it. And you know what? I was really good at it. I immediately got into that stock room and saw that there were really ways to make it more efficient and to keep better stock. And, it's one of those things where any job you have to do your best at, even if it's not what you want to be doing. And I didn't want to work in the back all day, but hey, it had a paycheck, and I didn't care, and I was good at it. And you know what it did is there was a lot of free time where I just sat in the back and wrote a play, and I worked every day on that play, and eventually it became the first big production I ever created, business as usual, and we did the show at the high school. That was the fall production, and I remember opening night, the people from the employment office that I worked with showed up, and I was like, "What are you guys doing here?" And they're like, "This is the thing you've been working on all summer, right?" And I said, "Pretty much." They said, "We wanted to see it. We're really proud. We watched it from paper to stage, and we couldn't be prouder of you." And I was like, "Wow, that's really cool." And it also felt like really adult, like this is how colleagues work. So it was a lot of fun. I had a really interesting summer working at the employment office. It wasn't the Grand Dinner Theater by any stretch, but it had a paycheck, and it was fun, and it was air conditioned. And if you're here in California in the summer, air conditioning is the greatest. But the other funny thing about the employment office is I discovered in the back there was a phone. Like a phone that was not on any records. It was really weird. So I would, I tested it out. It was right next to one of those old dot matrix printers that goes, right? And it would mark down the phone call. So I picked it up and I dialed my house. Doot, 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 doot. I let it ring. And I hung up, and then I watched the machine, and it went, and there was the phone number. And I was like, oh, this is cool. So I used to call people during the workday and then just watch the number appear on the thing. I knew that nobody read that printout. Nobody cared. So it just was one of those weird, like, learning the mechanics of the big business stuff, But no, the Grand Dinner Theater, which is what this episode is chiefly about, good times, really good times. Unfortunately, the theater itself closed in 1992. So not that long after I left, 4 years later, it's out of business. And then 1998, they blew the hotel up. In the wee hours of the morning, they blew up the Grand Hotel. And it became a parking lot during the construction of California Adventure. I'm not sure where it would be now because that area looks so different than it used to be. But it's all gone. All traces are gone. Like, I'm one of those weird guys because if I went down the gamut and I said, hey, I got my first job at the Grand Hotel, oh, they blew it up. And then I worked at the employment office. And I don't know if that's still there or not. I bet it still is. So maybe that's the exception to the rule. But then I worked at Multi-Video, and it's out of business, gone. Then I worked at Blockbuster Video, and that location and company went out of business. Then I worked at Spencer Gifts. The Buena Park one and the Cerritos one, both out of business. So I'm kind of like the schlep rock of businesses. You have to keep me around because as soon as I leave, the whole thing goes kaput. Isn't that funny? Like I can't go to the places I used to work. It doesn't work that way. But strange. I hope you enjoyed this not quite mini episode, but just episode about continuing the adventures of my employment and my grand, no pun intended, adventures. So thanks for listening. If you want to support the show, please go on iTunes and leave us a review. Those help our search listings, ratings, and they're so very much appreciated. Plus, it also lets me know who's listening and what you like about the show, and that's always helpful. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com. Search 91 Reasons. You can support the show by pledging like $1 a month, and it all helps and goes towards defraying the cost of the show. I just announced last night my weird project, Time Boxes, where I'm putting together pop culture boxes that are kind of like Hero Crate, Loot Crate, Box of Dread. They're just, you can imagine, out of all the places that I go, how much memorabilia I have accumulated and ephemera, just so much of it. And if you want a box of it, check out the Facebook page, and you can go to Facebook, search 91 Reasons or me, Jeff Tucker, and you can link through it. And just check it out and see if that's something you'd be interested in. I don't know what to do with it. It's just one of those things I had while driving on the freeway, which is where I get most of my crazy ideas. It's true. It's very true. But I am the voice. I am Jeff Tucker. Thanks for listening. The show that you listen to is called 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?